Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, March 10th, 2015, getting into the week. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, ready to answer the phone. I see somebody's already calling in. And we just have all kinds of stuff to talk about. Obviously, the big news right now is Hillary Rodham Clinton finally took to the microphone to try and explain away this whole email scandal. She kept everybody waiting for like 40 minutes. I guess she was hoping we'd all get bored and look someplace else. And it was kind of, I think, her attempt at a turnaround, sort of a repeat of Richard Nixon's Checkers speech. For those of you who are my age and remember that rather pathetic, pandering to the crowd from back then. Basically, Hillary got on, and before she got into the email thing, she was there talking about equality for women and all of her major campaign points, and we've done this, and we've got to deal with Iran. And then she finally got around to it, and in brief, she said there's 4 points that she's sending out there to her minions. The private server was merely for convenience. She only wanted to carry one device, not two. All of the government-related emails were captured at the other end. She swears she has sent all of her emails to the State Department. Honest. And then, of course, it was all followed by softball questions from hand-picked reporters. And I'm not kidding you. The very first reporter she picked asked her, if you were a male, would there be this stink about a private server? I mean, talk about desperation on the cusp of madness. Let's all feel sorry for Hillary because she's being victimized because she's a woman. And they really are just reaching to find anything that they can use to deflect this whole thing. And Hillary's basic attitude is, all right, I've addressed it. The questions are answered. Let's move on. I even heard one of her supporters the other day trying to bring back the vast right-wing conspiracy from when Bill was in office. I mean, they're grasping at straws on this whole one. And what she says is full of holes. The egg timer's already run out here because we all know it's much more convenient to set up and maintain a private email server in your home as opposed to carrying a second device. And by the way, on my iPhone, I can set up multiple email accounts. Little inside information that puts the lie to that part of the story. And even more embarrassing, Hillary was out there saying that her private server is going to remain private because it's got all the emails between her and her loving husband, Bill Clinton. Unfortunately, over at the Pundit Press, they're quoting Bill Clinton's official spokesman, Matt McKenna, as saying Bill Clinton has only ever sent 2 emails in his life, neither of which were to Hillary. His first email was in 1998 to John Glenn to congratulate him for his joyride on the shuttle, and the second was a mass email to troops serving in the Adriatic. This is coming from Bill Clinton's own spokesman that no, in point of fact, he and Hillary don't share a lot of emails. So Hillary's lying. Bill just proved it inadvertently. And of course she's lying. Her argument only works if the mass of American people will just trust her that she is telling the truth this time, and why should we do that? All righty, we're going to grab a phone call. We're going to step away from the email scandal. We're going to take a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, I think Hillary Clinton's email scandal, as bad as she is, I just think it's a non-issue with all the other stuff going on. I mean, you got Russia, ending the Treaty of Conventional Armed Forces in Europe. You got the BRICS, even ratifying the BRICS. I mean, I don't know if we're going to get out of this year, Mike, without like a major war. I mean, we're at a point where it's like worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you here a little bit. I think this email scandal is important because if we are going into a major war, we need to be thinking very carefully about who we want in charge of that war come 2016. And Hillary, for all of her accomplishments, has no military training whatsoever, and she's always been aggressively in support of war everywhere she went, and it does cut right to the heart of the matter. If we're really going into a major world war, I don't think Hillary is the person to be the commander-in-chief.
I think, though, the Democrat-Republican Party, I mean, they pick they're already, like when they get put as the head of, to run, they're already been hand-picked, basically. So they got their own agenda going already. So that's why I don't think, either if it's Bush or Clinton, she's not going to run because maybe they know the economy is going to collapse. She's getting out of it now and just using this scandal as a scapegoat. I don't know.
Well, no, she had that injury to her head not too long ago, and it's been reported that there seems to be some lingering damage, and she could just say, I've decided not to run for medical reasons. She doesn't need to concoct this whole email server situation. Because, everybody would say, all right, medical reasons, she's doing the wise and prudent thing and stepping down. This email server scandal is simply hammering home the point that she's going to be no more transparent than Bill Clinton was, or for that matter, Barack Obama or George Bush, that they are out there keeping secrets, and she cannot be trusted. And she's looking for loopholes in everything to do what she wants to do. And clearly, I think the reason most people are upset about this is we're seeing clear signs of a government that says all of our emails have to be fully on display and visible, but the elites are allowed to keep their emails private. And by the way, another big hole in her story is this idea that the emails that she sent were captured on the other end because they all went to government servers. We don't know that for a fact. We don't know what other individuals Hillary was allowing to use her private server, so that the emails would go from Hillary to person X and back to Hillary with absolutely no official trace whatsoever.
I think they all got head injuries.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's the lead in the water from all those antique pipes in Washington, D.C.
But Americans people listening to this, you need to just get ready because, I don't know, I've just been having some restless nights lately, and I think, I really don't think we're getting out of this year because of all these, you see both sides doing all these drills, practice it. Something's coming, Mike.
Yeah, everybody's getting ready. Everybody knows the U.S. is getting ready to start World War III. Well, actually, we're already in World War III. They just sort of hemming and hawing around it. But yeah, all these other countries that are on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list understand they're about to be invaded sooner or later, and they're using the very long delay in the current U.S. war agenda to try and prepare for it.
Mike, I just want to say the guy who called the other day about, ICBMs are used, no war on the battlefield anymore, like large armies. That's not true. That's what you got tactical nukes for and nuclear, biological, chemical suits. You can still fight on the battlefield with tactical nukes going on, as long as you're not over them. And the yield, it depends on the yield, but you can still be on the battlefield. That's why Russia has over 15,000 battle tanks. They're still building battle tanks.
Well, tanks are a great way to control the ground. Nuclear weapons, the U.S. Developed tactical nuclear weapons to blow holes in the enemy's lines and then send in a bunch of U.S. soldiers in a simulation out in Nevada, and they all came down with cancer and leukemia. So, but the reality is that ultimately you can destroy an enemy with these ICBMs, but you cannot occupy and conquer and control their assets, their land, their building, their factories without troops on the ground. And that is where the U.S. is going to come up short. Our weapons, what we had is already worn out from the wars we've been fighting. What the U.S. is buying is hideously expensive and not really very good at all. And that is why I'm very concerned that the U.S. cannot prevail in a conventional war against Russia and China and will resort to those nuclear weapons. And we are really at huge risk of, incinerating the surface of planet Earth in this debate over whose brand of paper and ink we're all supposed to use for the next 100 years.
I wish U.S. would start repainting their tanks because desert tan don't look good in the middle of a jungle.
Well, paint's cheap, and they'll get all the pacifists out there, the conscientious objectors here, paint a tank.
Thanks,
all right, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're still talking about the email scandal, and it is important because this scandal goes way beyond just Hillary. It's snaring a lot of people. They're trying to make it go away, but it basically underscores the fact that we currently live under a government which is supposed to be transparent to the people and is not. We live under a government that is supposed to respect our privacy because of the Fourth Amendment and does not. The relationship has been completely reversed. The government behaves as if they own us. rather than we the people owning the nation and its government. Judge Napolitano is out there saying Trey Gowdy's subpoena of Hillary Clinton is an impossible task, and technically it would be because ultimately any subpoena to be enforced would have to go over to the Department of Justice, which has a bad habit of just not moving forward, whether it's the IRS targeting of Obama's opponents or various other cover-ups. The Department of Justice is quite unjust here. Now, the Hillary Clinton private email scandal is beginning to spread as Tea Party groups are now seeking private IRS emails, not just the ones that the government is officially keeping for record keeping. They're saying, okay, we now know that these people who were playing these games were using private email. We need those as well. Now, Hillary has made the claim that she has released all of the relevant emails to the Department of State. Turns out she sent over paper copies, printouts, not electronic copies. Why would she do that and waste all those precious trees? Well, because you can't do a fast electronic search through paper hard copies. So she sent over the emails in a way that it's going to make it harder for people who are looking for things to research. Story out of Investment Watch blog. The White House works to distance itself from any fallout over Hillary Clinton's emails. Now remember, earlier in the week, actually late last week, President Obama came out and said he had no idea this was going on, that he only found out about it when he read it in the media. Same excuse he used for the IRS targeting. Then we find out that the White House was aware of the private email server at least as far back as August. And now it has come out that emails from Obama to Hillary were sent to her private server. And Obama is saying, well, I was using the address, but I didn't know the details of the account. I didn't know it was private. Well, Mr. President, I would like to remind you that official government computers domains end in .gov. And anybody who understands anything about computers and the Internet understands that if you are sending email to clintonemail.com, that is not a government machine. So Obama is either lying or, once again, he's admitting to the country that he's a moron. By the way, we posted a link to a video, a quote by Obama himself. The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide. That's going to come back. Meanwhile, Jan Psaki is out there trying to do damage control and saying, you don't want to look at all those emails. I mean, really, it's going to cost you taxpayers a bundle to process and release the email. It's a huge cost. Really, it's not worth it. Next, they're going to say that releasing the emails will contribute to human-caused global warming. I mean, they're that desperate. Now, before we get on to the rest of the news, I want to share kind of a little personal moment with you because here on the radio show and the website, I get a lot of cool gifts people will send to me. Somebody sent me these V for Vendetta knives, and I've got them sort of hanging all over the place here. Yesterday, I received a box from one of our fans that has one of those 80% complete lower receivers for an AR-15. So, oh, gee whiz, I have a new hobby all of a sudden. And I got to tell you, my prior gunsmithing experience is all black powder. This thing is actually very intimidating. But I can just imagine a criminal trying to break into my house right now, and I'll be there with my drill press and my files, and I'll be working away saying, boy, you wait 2 weeks. You're going to be in trouble in 2 weeks as soon as I'm done putting this thing here together. This being the Easter season, I've decided to chamber this for marshmallow peeps. So when I shoot the criminals, I can say, diabetes, you scum. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Obama just banned marshmallow peeps with an executive act, so I guess I can't do that after all. But thank you very much. This is really very, very cool, and I appreciate it greatly. Now then, getting on back to more serious stuff. Article out of RINF.com, The Origin of the New Cold War. And a lot of people have been drawing parallels between what we're going through with Russia now and what previous American governments were doing to demonize the Soviet Union. But this is not a new Cold War. This article rightly points out this war is already hot in Ukraine. And we're being pushed to a new global conflagration in this argument over whose ink and paper we're going to use for the next 100 years. That's what it's really all about. Now, there are some interesting developments in Ukraine. First of all, apparently over the last month, several high-ranking officials within the junta have met with strange deaths, all declared to be suicides. Shot himself with his hunting rifle, which is actually very hard to do. And we're seeing this other article over here, Wake Up From Your Slumber, where the Ukrainians are now disillusioned with the heroes of Maidan. And apparently the discontent with the junta is continuing to grow. We hear rumblings. There have been riots, protests. We've been hearing rumblings of a potential military coup. Maybe that's why these top officials were suicided. They were going to go along with replacing Poroshenko. But the manner in which they were dispatched is a reminder that if Putin had really killed Nemtsov, it would have been something innocuous. A suicide, a plane crash, a car crash. Nemtsov was killed in a way to guarantee maximum publicity, which is what tells us it was a false flag attack. Story again from Investment Watch blog. Europe blocks U.S. from racing to war against Russia ? And basically it's pointing out how all these European leaders are now starting to say, look, this has gone on far enough. Germany's Angela Merkel, France's Hollande are digging in the heels because they know if the United States kicks off a new world war against Russia, it's going to be fought on European soil. And they've been through that twice already. They don't want to go there again. As long as it was abstract and propaganda and political or economic, the European Union was willing to go along with this making stink face at Putin. But now that we're talking real weapons, real bombs, real craters, real deaths, the Europeans are chilling on this rapidly. So Obama is saying, well, all right, if you won't let me start a war with Russia, we'll go to war against Venezuela. Venezuela? Obama has declared Venezuela a threat to the national security of the United States of America. And he's seeking regime change. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. So as we mentioned before the commercial break, the U.S. government's regime changes in Ukraine, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen are going along so smoothly that Obama's decided to add another nation to his special high-interest targets list by going after Venezuela. And, of course, there's nothing new about it. The U.S. has been caught trying to overthrow Venezuela's government all the way back to the time of Hugo Chavez, because Hugo Chavez dared to run Venezuela's economy for the benefit of the Venezuelan people. He dared to sell Venezuela's oil for currencies other than the dollar. And the U.S. actually succeeded in removing Hugo Chavez at one point for, I think it was a grand total of 9 days before the Venezuelan people threw out the junta and put Chavez back in. Well, Chavez is gone, and now Nicolas Maduro is Venezuela's democratically elected president, and already the U.S. is saying he's a threat to the national security. How can Venezuela be a threat to the national security of the United States of America? We have nuclear arms. Venezuela's not going to invade unless they sneak up into Mexico and pretend to be illegal immigrants, and then Obama will just invite them into the country. Anyway. Apparently, Maduro's reaction to all of this is polite laughter, mockery, and basically reminding Obama that under international law, the U.S. does not have any right or jurisdiction to go into foreign countries and say you got to change your government. Getting on back to Ukraine, over at the State Department, Victoria Nuland is out there reassuring everybody that the United States can confirm that Russia is sending weapons into eastern Ukraine. They don't have any proof. Just take our word for it. We're the State Department. We wouldn't lie to you. And this statement was made in response to the revelation that the United States is already delivering lethal aid to Latvia. 120 armored units, including tanks. They're already sending in the weapons to get ready for the war, and Nuland's job is out there. Russia made us do it. They're sending Death Stars into eastern Ukraine, one for Donetsk and one for Lugansk. And we've got to respond to that. Anyway. The propaganda regarding ISIS just gets sillier and sillier all the time. They're out. The latest one out there is ISIS is demanding the demolition of Egypt's Sphinx and pyramids. That's really a little bit out there. And by the way, apparently ISIS is out there trying to explain away the reason they never attack Israel is because God didn't tell us to attack Israel. But by golly, they want to get the Sphinx and the pyramids. Remember what I said the other day about how all the antiquities in that part of the world are an embarrassment to Israel, because Israel's entire political justification for sitting on the Palestinians' land is the Old Testament, for which there is virtually no archaeological proof whatsoever. They've run around naming that, oh, this is this guy's tomb and that guy's tomb. There's no actual evidence to support it. It's just they gave it the name. And Israeli archaeology has been ridden with frauds. The pomegranate temple staff ornament that was supposed to be from the first temple turned out to be a fake. The Jehoash tablet, which was supposed to document repairs done to the first temple, that turned out to be fake. But if you go into any other country in the Middle East, you can't take 5 steps without tripping over the physical proof of their ancient history. And Israel would like that all to go away. We've got ISIS destroying ancient cities in Iraq. We have the United States seriously to face the ancient city of Ur with their military base. And remember the 2003 invasion? U.S. troops were guarding that oil ministry, but the Baghdad Museum was left wide open for looting. Israel wants everybody else's antiquities to vanish, to level the political playing field. And let's be very honest. Do you know how much work it would take to take down the Great Pyramids or the Sphinx? The Sphinx maybe with a large enough fuel air bomb. But those pyramids are solid rock. Do you think ISIS has that kind of resources to spend? Of course not. This is another of these hysterical, ISIS is going to do this, ISIS is going to do that. You have to hate ISIS enough to fling your babies any country where we say ISIS is. It's a complete fake. ISIS is a manufactured enemy that the U.S. uses to justify invasion of countries who have not actually done anything to us. We're not really invading Iraq for a third time, or Libya for the second time, or Syria for the first time, but ISIS is there. We've got to get ISIS. Article out of Rude Pundit, GOP senators to Iran. Go ahead and build nuclear missiles. So we've got these 47 Republican senators who directly sent letters, or a letter to the leaders of Iran, saying any deal you make with the White House, you shouldn't rely on, because the next president comes in, can void it with the stroke of a pen. And by the way, the letter that these 47 Republican senators sent is riddled with legal and factual errors. I think we need to start collecting tar and feathers for at least 47 people on this one. Now, Iran has responded to this letter with a very good observation. Iran's foreign minister said that this GOP letter undercutting the White House shows the United States is not trustworthy. It's a little late to the table on that one. Does anybody above the age of 2 think the U.S. government is trustworthy to begin with? Here's an observation over in Washington's blog here, and this is absolutely valid. All 47 of those Republican senators, by directly contacting the government of Iran, are in violation of the Logan Act. Now, the Logan Act goes back to 1799, the earliest history of our countries, and it was specifically named for Dr. George Logan, who was a Pennsylvania state legislator and later U.S. senator, who was privately negotiating with France in 1798 without the permission of the federal government. That's why the Logan Act exists. Nobody is allowed to negotiate with foreign governments but the State Department and the White House of the United States. We have all these GOP senators. They should be arrested. They should be in orange jumpsuits with manacles and heading off to jail right now. And by the way, there is a petition at the White House petition website demanding charges be filed against these 47 U.S. senators for violating the Logan Act. And apparently it's well along to the 100,000 signature threshold where the White House will have to respond. Now, going one step further, over at Bloomberg, they're asking if these 47 senators just committed an act of treason. And I'm not too sure about that, but definitely the Logan Act. Definitely the Logan Act. Now, India has just closed a $25 billion deal with Russia for 127 of their latest stealth fighter aircraft, which is upsetting the White House because, hey, you're supposed to be buying the F-35 from us. It'll work eventually, I promise. So, India knows where to spend their money wisely and prudently for the military. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And already we're seeing a new term of craft enter the political discourse regarding the email scandal. Actually, it's an old one. They were using it before. Hillary haters. Hillary hasn't done anything wrong. There are just Hillary haters out there. They hate her because she's a woman. That's their defense. All right, we're going to grab ourselves another little phone call here. Roger in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I'm a disabled veteran from the Vietnam era, and I received a questionnaire in the mail that I think I assume every veteran's going to get it. It's called a Million Veteran Program Baseline Survey. And I would advise all veterans not to fill this out. It says this national program will study how genes, lifestyle, and military exposures affect health and illness. And they want you to come in and give a blood sample. And although it says that you will be anonymous, they say they'll track you for the rest of your life. So I don't know how you can be anonymous and not track you.
Well, is there anything in this questionnaire that you find particularly alarming? I mean, are they asking if you own guns or something like that?
Yes, they ask that. They ask the color of your skin, your hair color, what ethnic, or you black, white, whatever. They even want to know your mom and dad, if they're still alive, how many brothers and sisters you got, when they're born. Some of the questions are very innocent, and then some of them are very, very, to me, is dangerous.
Does the questionnaire ask if you're taking any kind of prescription psychiatric medication?
It sure does.
Now, there's the problem with that one because they're talking about any veterans that are declared to be suffering a mental illness will lose their Second Amendment rights. And the reason they're doing that is because obviously the younger veterans, the ones just back from the Middle East, represent an already trained military force that could stand in opposition to the U.S. government. So, yeah, it sounds like it's another one of these overly intrusive questionnaires coming from the government. And remember, under the Constitution, all the government is allowed to know is how many people are living in a district to draw the district's representational boundaries. And other than that, the government has no right to know anything at all about your life.
Yes, and it also has on here, you can check a box that says, I do not want to participate, or I am unable to participate at this time, but you may contact me in the future. And it also says that if you don't send this back in, they will contact you again.
Okay, well, if I were in your position, I wouldn't fill it out either.
No.
Same thing when the census comes around. There's 2 people living here. That's all you're entitled to know under the Constitution.
You're very correct. And Michael, keep up the good work.
All right, thank you very much, and good luck. And I hope you're feeling better after all these years of since Vietnam here. So take care of yourself, okay?
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to let you go there. Now then, Benjamin Netanyahu says he is troubled by reports that the United States is offering to sell Arab states in the Middle East a nuclear umbrella to protect themselves from an attack by Iran. Well, Netanyahu is upset but it's not Iran the Arab nations are worried about. Iran does not have nuclear weapons. According to the Mossad, they're not building nuclear weapons. But Israel does have nuclear weapons with which it can threaten its neighbors. And if the U.S. provides a ballistic missile defense system that actually works to those Arab nations, then they're not going to do what Israel says, and that's why Netanyahu was whining and crying and down on the floor, kicking and screaming and throwing a tantrum. Now, back in 2009, Netanyahu was campaigning on devising a two-state solution to end all of the animosity between Israel and Palestine. He's now reversed that. Apparently he feels that he stands a better chance of re-election by taking the hard line of saying Israel will never cede any land to Palestinians. No concessions, no withdrawals. We stole it fair and square, and we're going to keep it. And he's out there basically saying that any land held by Palestinians is a haven for terrorists supported by Iran. So he hasn't given up on trying to frame Iran for something that's going on. Meanwhile, along with the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, there is now a movement to boycott the RE/MAX real estate firm. You've seen their commercials all over. They got the big hot air balloon, but apparently they are now selling condos in the illegal settlements Israel is building in the occupied West Bank. And there's apparently activists from around the United States last week went to Las Vegas, where RE/MAX was having their annual convention, and they staged a demonstration. Because RE/MAX ought not to be making profit off of other people's stolen lands, stolen homes. Now, the Palestinian Authority just did what I think is a very, very smart thing. In the run-up to Israel's elections, they have rounded up some 50 members of Hamas and Islamic Jihad and just thrown them in preventive detention. And I know it sounds very extreme, but their worry is that some of these people are probably Israeli agent provocateurs who will stage a terror attack to try and give the electoral advantage back to Likud, which right now is trailing in the polls. So, issues of legality aside, Hamas is complaining, like, oh, how dare you? But I think it was a very smart thing for PA to do, because I think probably everybody would very much like to see Likud be taken down a peg or two in the upcoming election. Might calm the situation down a little bit. All right, so let's talk about the economy. Bad day on Wall Street. Good thing those windows don't open in those air-conditioned buildings, or it would be raining stockbrokers all over the street right now. The Dow closed 332 points down. Everybody's getting skittish. They're saying it's the talk about a rate increase at the Federal Reserve. Some are trying to blame it on the hard winter. Sales are down and the rest of it. But the news is not good. A few more days like this, and there will be a genuine, actual panic on Wall Street. It's going to happen someday. It has to happen eventually. Might as well get it over and done with now. Forbes is reporting that the euro is nearing parity with the U.S. dollar. The euro has sunk to a 12-year low of 1.0735 euros to a single U.S. dollar. And the euro's fall is basically being driven by falling European bond yields, the situation in Greece, and an overall grim outlook for the economy, brought about by all these sanctions and the oil price war. Now, the situation in Greece looks to be heading toward the Grexit. Over at the Telegraph, they put it, defiant Greece at daggers drawn with EU creditors. And basically, the Greek Prime Minister is saying if the people of Greece are forced to choose between a restoration of their dignity or continued humiliation by the bankers, they're going to choose dignity. He's sending a signal. Greece is ready to leave. the European Union and default on their debt. Russia has rolled out the red carpet, and Greece is looking at how Russia renegotiated Cyprus's debt. Very generous terms. Lowered the overall interest, let them stretch the payments out. Putin signed the law for that just today. Now, over in France, the leader of the French National Front, Marine Le Pen, is saying that if his party wins their upcoming election, their agenda will be for France to withdraw from the euro. There are major protests in France going on right now. We have this video of French protesters with battering rams and chainsaws trying to get into a government office. But I guess since the fall of the Bastille, the French government built their buildings really solid. Expecting to see a guillotine any time now. Alrighty, we're going to be taking a break for our top of the hour news. More about the economy and science and other issues when we come on back, okay? And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open. 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. Tom is still in our control room, his hand hovering over the telephone, the sweat dripping from his brow, just waiting to pounce as soon as that bell rings. Getting on back to the economic news in Europe, a little reminder after all this brouhaha, the hard line with Greece, you do need to remember that Germany still owes Greece $269 billion in reparations from World War II. Part of that was money that the Nazis forced Greece to loan to them, which was never repaid and has been accruing a reasonable rate of interest ever since. Along with Grexit and Frexit, we're now dealing with Brexit. There's an article over an Investment Watch blog about how London financial people are starting to look at how a separation of Britain from the Eurozone might impact their assets and property. Now, Britain has never adopted the euro. They're still on the pound sterling. But they're looking to maybe disentangle completely from the European Union. There's huge public outcry about not getting tangled up with this European Union anymore because they can all see what has happened to every nation under the European Union. Lower standard of living, poor economy, loss of sovereignty, loss of privacy. And here's where it gets really interesting. This was reported up in CNS News, and it involves Boston University economist Lawrence Kotlikoff testifying before the Senate Budget Committee on February 25th, basically said that behind all the propaganda about a 5.5 unemployment rate and recovery and the rest of it, the United States is actually in worse fiscal shape than Greece. There is a $210 trillion, with a T, dollar fiscal gap. And America is trying to convince everybody we're the richest nation on earth because our money junkies have more money than anybody else's money junkies. But the reality is our nation is broke. We're not going to be broke in 5 or 10 years or 25 years. It is broke right now and hopelessly in debt. Another article that sort of reinforces that, if the U.S. measured inflation the way they do in Europe, our consumer price index would look much, much worse. This is from Albert Edwards, and there's a chart to go along with it. Remember, the U.S. government's economic reporting to you is just based on whatever equations and rules they want to make up that make things look better than they really, really are. See, Putin has also signed the law on ratification of the $100 billion BRICS New Development Bank deal. China has already got their version of SWIFT up and running. Let's see, consumer spending tumbles. Bank of America is saying it's all the fault of the snow and the ice that you're not supposed to look at because the world is warming, and is claiming its predictive models are right. It's the world that's wrong, which we're also seeing from the carbon Nazis. Let's grab a couple of phone calls here. We're going to go with Michelle in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I would like to find out, see what you know about the treaty with the United Nations and the United States about them basically trying to disarm the American people and dissolving our military.
There has been talk about, as the North American Union firms up, which, given the problems in the EU, I don't think is going to happen. But yeah, there has been talk about the U.S. military being seconded to the United Nations, and in many cases, our U.S. troops on foreign soil are under the control of United Nations officers. It's a very gradual transition. As far as global disarmament, that's been on the UN agenda for quite a long time. They've succeeded in a great many countries, all of whom are now regretting having allowed that to happen. But the goal there is a one-world government, everybody disarmed and helpless, and permanently in debt to a single private central bank. That's the agenda right now.
Well, I just hope that they understand that that's not going to happen here. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of good people that are going to die if they decide to try to do that. And I'm sure you understand that.
I understand that. I would like to avoid it at this point. I think it's going to happen. And the reason I'd like to avoid it is...
I would like to avoid it, too. I have kids and grandkids.
Because the wrong people die in these things, unfortunately.
Absolutely. That's what I mean. That a lot of good people will die because we're not going to, you know, just sit back and let them take our weapons. That's not going to happen. Yeah,
it's contentious in the extreme, and unfortunately, I mean, the main focus of my 21 years doing this has been to head off the world war and to try and peacefully encourage the federal government to go back to its constitutional bounds, neither of which have worked, and I'm dealing with a little bit of a sense of personal failure on that regard. I would like to avoid a bloody revolution in this country. Unfortunately, at this point, it seems like we're headed that way. It's exacerbated by the fact that the U.S. government has tried to kick up some kind of a violent uprising in a controllable fashion so that they can declare martial law, suspend the Constitution, say turn in your guns and the rest of it. So far, the American people have been smart enough to see through these frauds and not fall for these stunts. But, we're all out here trying to be moral, ethical people and play by the rules, dealing with a government that thinks the rules are just there to be broken and changed and gotten around with and rewritten to serve their own private interests. And so...
right, and I wonder how long that they think that they can push the American people, because that's what it seems like that they're trying to do, just push us to see how far they can push us until, because, there's a point where everybody, I don't care how, nice of a person you are, you can only be pushed so far.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. It's right there in the Declaration of Independence. History has shown that people are disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. Well, unfortunately, the evils in this nation are no longer sufferable. We have hit that point. And I don't think the U.S. government is necessarily doing all of this abuse just out of spite and politics. If this economist who testified before the Senate Budget Committee in February is correct, our government is hopelessly broke. They're just desperate to find any way to take more money away from us and make us think it's our idea. Carbon taxes, Obamacare, the rest of it. The pillaging of the people is going on right now before our very eyes, but there will come a time where somebody is just going to say, to heck with this, and the fighting back is going to start. And it's going to erupt.
Because like you keep saying, we don't have the money that they want, that they apparently think that we have.
That's a big problem. Yeah, we don't have it. We absolutely don't have it.
Has it. So you're right. So they need to look at the 1% and start pillaging them because we don't have it.
Well, the 1%ers are unfortunately in charge of this, and their agenda is to have all the money for themselves. And that, of course, is very destructive because to have a healthy, operating, functioning economy, money has to be circulating at all levels of the economy into all necessary areas of investment, not just piled up over Wall Street, Washington, D.C., the Hamptons, wherever else they're hiding their riches. And the economy is already broken.
Right. That was just a little bit of sarcasm. I know who's running the show.
Yeah. No, I understand. So, it's an...
Okay, well, thanks. Yeah.
All right, you got it. We're going to let you go here. And, the American government knows that they're pushed by the private central bank to keep taking more from us. They know at some point we're going to fight back. They're arming and preparing to deal with us, to put us in our place, slap us around like the slaves that they see us as right now. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're just going to go right back to the phones here. Glenn in California. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. I just wanted to share with you something really funny. I called into my clinic that I go to see my doctor at, and they put me on hold. And while I was on hold, their hold music was this Americana country, like milked down little ditty of vaccinations, how every child was sent to us from heaven. We must love them and vaccinate them. I'm quoting as close to verbatim as I can. And that was the chorus. And then the verses were the list of the diseases. One of them which cracked me up was the hepatitis B, which I think on your show we, had the woman that just talked about the sexually transmitted disease, and the next verse was their vaccination schedule, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 15 months, and it went on for like the whole verse. It was the most amazing thing. And my question for you is, how do you think some people can listen to that and not understand the desperation behind that propaganda?
Yeah, that's the first thing that occurred to me is the vaccine industry is they're seeing people turn away from their products. That's why they're trying to get the government to force us all to buy their products. And that, of course, is a violation of our basic freedoms. If we have any rights at all, it is the right to decide what goes into our bodies and, more importantly, what does not, especially with a track record of fraud coming from the FDA, demonstrated harm. We were going to report this later in the show, but looking at this recent measles outbreak, which they're still trying to blame on the people who didn't get vaccinated, they have now confirmed the exact strain of measles all these kids have come down with is the strain that was used to manufacture the vaccine. And so at this point, the vaccine is actually causing the disease. And then they use the surge in the disease to sell more vaccine. And all of this is driven...
Here's the other thing. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, all of this is driven by greed. Desperately broke government, desperate for any kind of tax revenues, is just turning a blind eye to the harm these products are causing. As long as they're selling, and now the government is going to step in and mandate vaccines for adults. So we have to go back and get those 40 or 50 shots that didn't exist when we were little kids. Oh, you should get them now. Money, 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 money.
That was my next question. I wanted to get a little bit more from you on what you thought about that, because I'm in, because of other health concerns, I'm kind of in the medical system. And I noticed the questions on those forums get more and more aggressive every time they ask about vaccines. And I'm in California, which is one of those states that, we're dealing with some legislation that's pending regarding that. And, what do we do about that? We're reliant on the care, and they'll refuse it if you don't comply with their vaccination schedule.
Well, that's definitely one of the more onerous things coming out of the health insurance companies and Obamacare is that you are not in control of your medical care anymore. You will do what we tell you to do when we tell you to do it, or we'll just cut you off completely and let you wither away and die, ignoring the fact that people who are not part of that prescription medication treadmill overall seem to be a lot healthier. And I understand people who have serious medical conditions and they're in the system and they're dependent on the system. And once you're dependent on the system, they're in control of you. But it is a huge scandal. These vaccines are dangerous. These vaccines are provably causing the illness that people are supposed to be vaccinated against. And a big part of it has to do with the very rapid, reckless development of what are called attenuated pathogen vaccines, where they're taking the real virus or the real bacteria, they're weakening it, they say, putting it in the vaccine so you'll get the symptoms, you'll trigger the immune response without getting the symptoms. But so many of these have reverted to full potency in the body. The oral polio vaccine was just scandalized. People were getting polio from the polio vaccine.
Or the people around them. Now, one other thing is, is there a spot on your site where you've compiled the recent disclosures from the CDC and all that? Because I want to feel prepared when I go into the doctors. I want to be able to say, these are the studies, these are the facts. The flu vaccine obviously infects, the people around the person who takes it, et cetera. Are you aware of a resource that people that are in my situation that have to deal with it?
I don't have one at my website, but you should go over to naturalnews.com, and they just have it all. And I don't know how good their indexing is, but you can go to like the Google search engine and you can type in vaccine, then you follow it with the word site, SITE : and the name of a website. And Google will give you the search results only for that website. And it's a great way for finding information from just one website and, not having to deal with all the gratuitous propaganda that's thrown up there at the same time.
Awesome. And good. I'm glad I asked these questions because I think that's something that a lot of listeners will get, good, useful information from. So we got to fight this thing in California. It's starting to get scary. Yeah,
it really is. And basically the government is treating us like we're livestock. We're a herd. We're not allowed to decide what we're going to eat, what we're not going to eat, what medications we can take, what we're not going to take. We're really being treated just the same as cattle or chickens or any other farm animal. And I, for one, am sick and tired of it.
Coming from an agricultural perspective, an organic farming perspective, and now looking at this system and listening to your show, it's been a mind-boggling experience. I thank you so much for your time, your effort, work. Everything that you've paid for what you're doing now is well worth the cost, Michael, and I hope that someday I can help you out.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. We're going to let you go here. Thank you for the phone call. We're coming up on a commercial break, and I want to get some news in here. Question being asked, should the Fed raise their rates when everyone else is cutting in this currency war? Is the Fed really going in the right direction or not? Or are they trying to stifle the runaway inflation before it becomes really obvious that's what's going on, that we're in hyperinflation? Now, over in Las Vegas, Caesars Entertainment Corporation is going through a bankruptcy, and recently the laws were changed. It used to be that when a company went out of business or went into bankruptcy, their employees and their retirees were at the head of the line to be paid. Well, that's changed now. The bondholders are put in front of the line. And if there are derivatives involved, they get the number one spot here. So basically, Caesars Entertainment Corporation employees have just received a form letter that they have lost their retirement income because the bankruptcy restructuring is saying, the pension plan is liquidated to pay off the bills. So we're going to screw the workers, but save that casino. That casino's important there. But those workers, we can always find more of those out there. Alrighty, we're going to take a break for some more commercials. We're going to come on back here, and apparently McDonald's is not doing so well. I guess people aren't loving it the way they used to. We'll explain why when we get back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economy, and we're talking about McDonald's, which is an iconic American company. We all grew up with McDonald's, place to hang out after school, get a 10-cent hamburger. At least that's what it was back when I was a kid. And they're in trouble. And apparently their sales are continuing to decline. They had very bad February sales. And there are two things going on. Now, the first is something that's gotten a lot of comments in the corporate media, and that is that as Americans become more health conscious and more sensitive to the issue of additives in the food, they're turning away from processed foods in general, fast foods that are loaded with fillers, because we live in a country where words like tuna or beef are trademark names for something that is other than 100% tuna or 100% beef. And there are these patties that are made of multiple components, which McDonald's is allowed to say 100% pure beef, because beef no longer means piece of a cow. It means something else. If you go to the supermarket and you buy a can of tuna, doesn't mean that there's actual tuna in there. There are 17 different species of fish that the FDA allows to be sold under the name of tuna, all to help the corporations. So people are getting very, very concerned about what is in their food. They're turning away from processed food and fast food, and that's definitely a part of it. But I think there's another issue. I think McDonald's made the same mistake as Radio Shack. They built their business empire serving a particular segment of the population. People who needed a meal on a budget. And then a few years ago, McDonald's tried to upscale its image with the McCafe and all this other high-end stuff, tried to look like it was more than just a fast food restaurant. And inevitably, the prices had to go up in order to pay for all of that. And so McDonald's, I think, was seen as having turned its back on the low-end budget customer. And that was their, literally, bread and butter. And so their original customer base has dissolved. They can't attract the high-end, higher-end customer base because those people are concerned about what's in the food. And I think that's why they're in trouble right now. I mean, if you go and get a burger at McDonald's now, I mean, get ready for the sticker shock. And Radio Shack did exactly the same thing. Radio Shack built its business serving the electronic hobbyist. And then they started going into end consumer products. Stopped carrying all the little bits and pieces that people like me need to build things. And started carrying the same whiz-bang gizmos as everybody else. Divided the market, and that's why they're in trouble. When you build a business, you stick with your customer base if you expect longevity. Now, there's another little story that just came out over at Raw Story, apparently over in New York. And McDonald's there just fired an 8-year veteran worker because apparently she, out of her own pocket, bought food for firefighters after they put out a house fire. And for some reason, McDonald's had a problem with that. And they fired her for donating food to firefighters. I don't know what they're thinking over there. I'd start boycotting McDonald's, but I don't do McDonald's anymore anyway. All righty, let's see. Now, a couple of breaking stories that caught my eye here. Story out of RINF.com. Gaza fishing industry held hostage at sea. And we have been talking about for the last couple of days where Israel's naval forces are firing on Gaza fishermen fishing in their own waters, their own coastal waters. And they killed a 25-year-old Palestinian a day or two ago. And it's very upsetting, very angry. Then we're hearing a story out of WakeUpFromYourSlumber.com where the Israel Navy is firing on the shore of Gaza. And ground forces are shooting at farmers across the barrier from Israel. Boy, what's going on here? And now we're getting this story about how the Israeli army invades Bilin and just breaking into houses and searching them. What Netanyahu is clearly trying to do is provoke a response. Because the only thing that is going to save his re-election right now is if he can gin up another war with the Palestinians. And we saw exactly these kinds of provocations leading up to cast lead, pillar of fire, whatever they call these constant wars against Gaza. When Netanyahu got home from his failed speech before the U.S. Congress, he walked into a firestorm of protest among his own people. There was an anti-Netanyahu rally in Tel Aviv, drew 50,000 people. The videos were amazing. They were packed in there. Anybody but Bibi. And Netanyahu is in a bit of a corner because the instant he no longer has the status as a head of state, there are prosecutors waiting for him with a whole raft of corruption charges. And so it looks to me like Netanyahu is going to start some kind of another war with Gaza oh, they've kidnapped 3 children and killed them, and launch another attack in the hope that being in the middle of another bloody war on the people of Gaza will save his reelection. I think that's what he's doing. I hope I'm wrong, because those people of Gaza and the West Bank have suffered enough. But it looks to me like that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to get Gaza or the West Bank to respond to these provocations somehow in a way that he can say, oh, we're being attacked. See, the Palestinians hate us. They're coming for us again. You can't vote me out of office now. I'm the only person who can protect you. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on over there. Up in Chicago, Jesse Jackson has given his endorsement to Jesus Chuy Garcia for the upcoming runoff for mayor. And this is very important because there is a sizable African-American vote out there in Chicago. Now, neither Emanuel or Garcia are addressing the issue of Homan Square and, as it turns out, 2 additional police torture centers. So I'm not sure if it really matters all that much which one of these 2 guys wins, although I think I would like to see Rahm Emanuel's career get a little bit derailed here before he dreams of White House glory. Now, as you know, the trial of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev is underway. It's a kangaroo court. It's a show trial. They basically gave Dzhokhar the same attorney they gave to Ted Kaczynski and the underwear bomber and a bunch of other people. Judy Clark is her name. Her job is to protect the official story, not serve her client. We've already established that. If I were Dzhokhar's attorney, I could get him acquitted immediately in front of that jury, just showing the pictures of the backpacks the Tsarnaev brothers were actually wearing versus the remains of the backpack that held the bomb. That's it. That's your reasonable doubt right there. She's there to protect the story. Meanwhile, the evidence that this was, in fact, an intelligence operation continues to surface. Over in Izvestia, pardon me, they ran a story earlier today confirming that the older brother, Tamerlan, attended a CIA-sponsored workshop dealing with events in the North Caucasus Mountains. He was a spook. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the show trial of Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, which is little more than a propaganda exercise to try and reinforce the official story of the Boston bombing. But there's a huge amount of evidence out there that the official story is junk. Just like the official story about 9/11, the official story about the Lusitania, the official story about Saddam's nuclear weapons, and on and on and on and on and on. How much do you have to be lied to until you acknowledge you live with a government that lies to you about everything? So, Sibel Edmonds, who is a rather well-known whistleblower, basically says that CIA was running the Tsarnaev brothers long before the Boston bombing. They had a CIA connection. They were tied in with CIA operations over in Russia. They were assets. And when the government needed a couple of convenient dead patsies, the Tsarnaevs were it, although Dzhokhar survived the attempt to silence him, which is why they're having to go through this exercise. And for those of you who are assets for the government today, please keep this in mind, because your loyalty to the government and service is not going to be returned. There's no guarantee. On the day the government decides that you're more useful to them dead and bloody in the streets somewhere, dressed up like an ISIS terrorist, that is how you will end up. Another story out of 12160, a little bit of a flashback. The FBI never told the Boston police or the Massachusetts State Police about possible Russian terror connections of the 2 marathon bombers until 3 days after the attack. They were still constructing the story. By the way, Tamerlan's uncle Ruslan is married to the daughter of a top CIA official. So it's all tangled up in there. By the way, the family of Ibrahim Todashev is suing the FBI in civil court over his murder. I'm going to speculate that the FBI will try and settle out of court rather than have any more public attention on this fiasco. Alrighty, now, interestingly enough, the Quinnipiac University poll, I'm beginning to seriously doubt that they're on the up and up here. Apparently they're out there saying that Fox News is now the most trusted network in the corporate media. And the part they're really not talking about too much is the result of the poll where Americans say network TV news are much less trustworthy than it was in the days of Walter Cronkite. And we know they were lying back then because Cronkite was right on board the magic bullet theory, the lone assassin in Dealey Plaza. They've been lying all along here. New revelations from Edward Snowden. The CIA has spent 10 years hacking into iPhones and iPads. And apparently a big part of this is that the operating code on these devices is itself encrypted. And the CIA has been trying to reverse engineer it so they can replace it with their own version that will look and feel the same, leading to intellectual property lawsuits if caught, but have backdoors in there in order to monitor all these devices at will. And, of course, open up new vectors for cyber criminals to come in and steal your banking information, your business secrets, and pictures of your significant other in states of undress. Because you cannot put in a government backdoor and guarantee that only the government will use it. And even if only the government is using it, there's no guarantee they're going to use it for any kind of lawful purpose. That was the big stink over the APEC scandal. The Asia Pacific Economic Conference up in Seattle years ago. U.S. government intelligence agents were breaking into the computers of conference attendees to steal business secrets for President Bill Clinton's cronies so they could win the negotiations. They could win the bids. They knew what their competition was bidding. They could just go down a little bit. That's industrial espionage, and that is not what we pay taxes to our government to conduct. All righty, we're going to grab a couple more phone calls here. Dennis in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It was good to talk to you again. I will hope everybody doesn't forget that two of the FBI members that arrested Zokar that night in the boat died mysteriously about a week or two later in an accident, in a training accident. They fell out of a helicopter.
Yeah, I remember that one. Whoopsie, there go the witnesses to what actually went down. They fell out of the helicopter. Golly gee shuckies, what a terrible coincidence.
Yeah, I just hope people don't forget that when, they consider the whole thing that went down here. It's it's one of those things that you go,
anybody who understands the aerodynamics of helicopters and how they fly knows that is a nonsense story, because hanging under that rotor, there's no the vector, the centrifugal force is always straight down. And anybody who's in a helicopter doing an operation with an open door, they're going to have a safety line on. These guys were thrown out of that helicopter to silence them.
Oh, I don't doubt that. That's all I got, Mike. Have a nice afternoon. Keep up the good work.
You got it. And, for all you FBI types listening to that show, to this show, that's something else you ought to keep in mind. When you know too much, they'll just pitch out of a helicopter onto the ground. All righty, we're gonna grab another phone call. James in South Carolina, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'd like to know what you think about this thing about the abolition of the Constitution in 1933. I hear people talk about it all the time, and I just happen to hear it spoken about on Alex Jones. I'm not saying this isn't true, but I find it hard to believe.
Well, it doesn't. The only people who can legally abolish the Constitution are we the people, because we created it in the first place. Now, there was an attempted coup d'etat against Roosevelt in 1933 that would have suspended the Constitution, but that coup d'etat failed. And I know there's a lot of people out there saying, well, it was suspended in 1933, and that's why the federal government can do what they can do today. No, they cannot. When this government is not in compliance with that Constitution and the Bill of Rights, it is no longer a legal, legitimate government of this land, and we the people owe them no allegiance, no obedience, no money, and certainly we don't owe them the lives of our children for their wars of conquest. That Constitution is the basis. If there's no Constitution, there's no federal government, because the authority of the federal government rests on that document. If the Constitution was vanished in 1933, then so did the federal government, and all we have is a bunch of criminals in our capital city looting us at will.
Well, I have heard this. I've heard that all of the federal judges were called to Washington in 1933. I've read that or heard it. Have you ever heard anything like that?
No, I have not heard that, and I don't care what kind of mechanisms they say happen. The only way for the Constitution to be taken down is by the will of the people saying we need to put something better in its place. There is no federal government authority to abolish the Constitution. They can amend it by passing an amendment through Congress, signed by the President, sent to the states for ratification, where their legislatures will vote it through, and their chief executive will sign it. It's not a legitimate bill until they do, and you need 3/4 of the states to do that. That is the only legal way for the Constitution to be altered.
Well, I would say this is probably what some people call patriot mythology. Would you agree with that?
Which is the mythology?
The fact that it was abolished in 33.
Yeah, I'd say it sounds like one of these hoaxes they put out there to keep everybody confused and running around in circles.
Okay. Hey, thanks. Keep it up, Michael.
You got it. It is up to we, the people, to decide if the Constitution is real or not, and that Constitution exists to protect us from the government. And I am not willing to say it's no longer applicable anymore. That Constitution is the original contract with America, and if the government is refusing to comply with that contract, they are not a legal, legitimate government of this land any longer. And we do not owe them our obedience, our allegiance, our money, or the lives of our children. Period. End of discussion. I've got a zero-tolerance policy for governments not complying with that Constitution. If they don't want to comply with the Constitution, they should find some other form of employment and make way for those who will manage this country for the benefit of this country and its people. All right, we're coming up here on a break for our news. I know we got a caller on the line. Keith, you're going to have to wait until after the news break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We've got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you in just a second. But first of all, we're now getting word that apparently Israeli soldiers in the Golan are being fired upon from the Syrian border. One officer hurt. Looks like Netanyahu's going to start a war someplace somehow in a desperate bid to maintain his position. All right, going to the phones here. Keith in Montana, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind today?
Well, Mike, I actually had some good news and bad news for us.
Uh-oh. Give us the good news first.
Well, the good news is the Rangers are doing their job and actually getting something done. The bad news is the military has removed their enlistment form, the PDF form, from the website.
They can't do it from my website.
No, they can't.
I'm going to put that. I'm going to put that right back up on the top of the main page right now.
I couldn't believe it. I've been sending out links and letters and stuff like that. Now everyone's telling me your link isn't working anymore.
Well, the good news is they're listening to us now.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they're paying attention.
I just wanted to do that. Anyway, my best to you, Claire, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, we're going to get on back to this surveillance stuff. More revelations from Edward Snowden. Everything's been compromised. The government absolutely wants full transparency with you, but none for them, as Hillary Clinton has just demonstrated for us all to see. Now, down in New Zealand, a while back, Prime Minister Key vowed that if it were proven that New Zealand was engaged in this mass surveillance and spying, that Edward Snowden said that he would resign. And he insisted, he told the people of New Zealand and the world that GCSB does not engage in mass surveillance. Well, apparently, now, it's pretty obvious they do. And Prime Minister Key is not going to resign. He's basically saying, it was just rhetoric. You shouldn't take me seriously when I say things like that. We shouldn't take any of these leaders seriously, no matter what they say, because it's all lies and fraud and deception. Sooner or later, you all have to wake up and admit you live with a government that lies to you about everything, regardless of what nation you're in. You need to just stand there looking in the mirror and saying, yes, the government lies to us about everything. It has to sink in. Now, the brother of one of the victims of 9/11 in the World Trade Towers, Matt Campbell, is suing the BBC and claiming that the BBC is in violation of British anti-terrorist legislation in that they covered up the truth of a terrorist attack. Willfully complicit. The BBC is complicit with terrorism, according to this lawsuit. And they're right. We have all seen the video of the BBC reporting that building number 7 had collapsed, with the building still standing behind them, proving they were working from a script and somebody got off the timeline with regards to bringing building 7 down. There are calls for the head of the BBC Trust, Rona Fairhead, to step down because of her involvement with HSBC and how that may have influenced BBC's coverage of the scandal. BBC's in a lot of trouble. Apparently they're showing how butch they are by slapping Jeremy Clarkson of Top Gear around. Again. Now, speaking of computers and things with spyware in them, the new Apple Watch is already not looking like it was the smartest move that Apple's ever done. They're expecting that the new Apple Watch is going to use up to 1/3 of the total annual gold supply coming from the mines for those gorgeous 18-karat gold cases. But the watch has got several major shortcomings. For one thing, it's not a standalone device. It's an extension for your iPhone. If you don't have your iPhone with you, the iWatch does not work. Or maybe we should call it the iSpy, because NSA is in there as well. Now, they have been advertising on their commercials and literature that the battery will last 18 hours, which is actually short for such a device. But now, Cook is having to admit, and it's even in the literature that comes with the watch, that with normal usage, the battery's life is as low as 3 hours. You get 8 hours if you only use it for 45 minutes during those 8 hours. And of course, if you turn it off, the battery life will last a week. That's a major oops. That's like Google Glass oops. That's like Lisa oops. And who wants to pay hundreds up to thousands of dollars for a watch that will be obsolete and need to be replaced every 3 years? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, I've got this solar-powered Casio, which, barring accident, should last me the rest of my life. This doesn't need to be upgraded. And how hard is it to just reach into your pocket and get your iPhone as opposed to staring at your watch? Because it's harder to see. And looking at your watch all the time, everyone around you is going to think, oh, he's bored with me. It's one of those ideas, it sounds really good. And if we had a healthy economy where people are willing to go out and buy the latest gadgets and toys, it might actually work. But this economy doesn't support that. The money junkies have all the money, and the money junkies don't have enough wrists to buy up the 5 million watches Apple has already ordered. I think it's going to be a huge failure. I certainly don't want one. It's amazing. Meanwhile, Jeb Bush has come out saying that the new FCC net neutrality rules are craziest ideas. It's going to stifle competition. And I think what we're going to see happen is we've been played here, because they're going to have a big hue and cry over about net neutrality, and all the lobbyists from all the telecom companies are going to come in, and they're going to they're going to repeal that part of it. They're going to say, all right, the net neutrality rules are gone, but they're going to leave in place the other 300 pages of that FCC document by which the government will exert tyrannical control over the Internet and its content. So we got the stick and not even the carrot, looks like here. Now, here's a very interesting story. This was over in the Huffington Post. For the first time ever in the history of the United States of America, a prosecutor actually is going to jail for wrongfully convicting an innocent man. Now, this is down in Texas. Former prosecutor and Judge Ken Anderson has pled guilty to intentionally failing to disclose evidence in a case that sent an innocent man, Michael Morton, to prison for the murder of his wife. It's right out of the movie The Fugitive. When Anderson was trying this case as the prosecutor, Anderson had evidence that would have cleared Morton, including statements from the crime's only eyewitness that Morton wasn't the killer. Anderson sat on the evidence. He wanted another notch in his prosecutorial gun. And Morton went to jail for 25 years. Anderson's career flourished because he always gets his murder convictions, and was eventually a judge. So what kind of a punishment is meted out to a prosecutor and a judge who ruined a man's life for 25 years after the man had had his wife murdered? He gets 10 days in jail. 10 days in jail. Yes, he's losing his law license and 500 hours of community service. That's it. For wrecking an innocent man's life. 10 days in jail. That is a scandal in and of itself. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and talking a little bit about the police. Very interesting article out of Blacklisted News. Police across the United States are being disciplined, but not for brutality against the people. They're being disciplined for not writing enough tickets. These police departments, their city, county, state governments are desperate for more money. And they're pillaging the people. That's what's going on. We went through that here in Hawaii, where there's major crime going on. And the police resources are all down there writing tickets as fast as they can because those make money. And this story has these police officers coming forward to say, yes, there's a quota system. There's a quota system for tickets. There's a quota system for arrests. And if you don't meet the quota, or if you try and go public on it, you'll be punished severely. But if you go on out and shoot innocent people or dogs, nothing happens. Now, there's an idea. Maybe instead of shooting people's dogs, they should just write them a ticket for violating the leash laws, and that's going to ease the tensions a little bit, but not much. Now, as you heard on the SRN news break, the White House has backed off their promise to ban a certain type of AR-15 ammunition by imperial edict, because they were roundly criticized, first of all, for violating the Second Amendment, second of all, for writing the laws of the land from Obama's desk, which is not his job. Just as foreign policy belongs to the president, creation of the laws belongs to Congress. Those are the rules. And, of course, you had all these police unions and benevolent associations come forward to say, we've never been fired at with this specific type of steel-tipped ammunition. They call it a cop killer, but no cops have been shot at with it. That may change. I'm sure the gun grabbers are going to go out there and shoot a police officer with this type of ammunition to justify the ban, because that's the way they operate. But they backed off for at least a little tiny bit. But we're hearing that the White House is looking at banning other kinds of ammunition. And the goal here is to weaken the American people, to make sure they have less powerful weapons and ammunition than the government does, to take away their body armor. They're still talking about that one. And my response to that is, again, going back to that terrible shootout at the Empire State Building in New York, where 9 bystanders were shot, all by the police. Of course, the NYPD is saying they walked into the bullets. They did it deliberately to make us look bad. You tell me why those innocent bystanders, gunned down by the police, should not have been allowed to have body armor if they so choose. I dare anybody to justify that. So it's all about weakening the American people in the face of an ever more aggressive, tyrannical government. That's what it's about. And it almost doesn't matter now that Obama has backed off the ban on this special type of ammunition because the store shelves are empty. The instant they talked about it, everybody went down and bought cases and cases of this type of ammunition to have just in case. So, anyway. Alrighty, a couple of news stories here, getting on back to Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine does not really have much money. Even with the new IMF loan at usurious interest rates, they still don't have money to pay for natural gas, but by golly, they're buying weapons. At least $600 million to be spent this year will be going to weapons for Kiev. They're going to solve all their problems by killing the people who don't like them. Another interesting article in Sputnik News, NATO's new lease on life confronting foes of its own creation. NATO's been languishing. Nothing to do. The Soviet Union was gone. Well, we'll just demonize Russia and then we'll get money and weapons and toys and power and authority and promotions. We'll get promotions. I remember many, many years ago, there was a movie called MASH, which led to a spin-off TV series, and the guy who played the colonel in the feature film, which was Donald Sutherland, and I can't remember the actor's name, but every one of his speeches always started off with, in the dark days before Pearl Harbor, which didn't seem to make a lot of sense. And I got to work with this actor on a later production, and I said, what did that mean? And he said, well, the context of this was that he was a colonel only because wars lead to promotions. And before Pearl Harbor, nobody was being promoted, nobody was getting budgets, nobody was getting weapons, and Pearl Harbor changed that around. And I came to understand, yeah, that's why you would have that point of view. And again, Donald Sutherland, when he was playing Mr. X in Oliver Stone's JFK, was saying, you know, no war, no money for the Pentagon. Gin up a war, the money starts flowing. It's all driven by the money junkies. And that's what they're doing here. They need a war to get military spending ramped up. They need a war to distract us all from the fact that this government has mismanaged this nation's economy into dire straits. If that economist testifying before the Senate Budget Committee, February 25th, is correct, we're in worse shape than Greece right now. Now, here's another bizarre story as they're cranking up the Russian propaganda. Jen Psaki made a comment about a new documentary about Crimea, denouncing it as clearly Russian propaganda. And she was challenged on that. What part of this documentary is Russian propaganda? And they pushed on her, and she was forced to admit she hadn't actually seen the film. She just sort of psychically intuited that any documentary about Crimea is going to be pro-Russian propaganda. I still think, looking at her eyes, she's on heavy tranquilizers, which you'd have to be doing that job of going out there and lying to the world to start a war. Now, Victoria Nuland is out there openly acknowledging that the U.S. is putting pressure on nations that don't want to go along with any more anti-Russian sanctions, specifically Hungary, Greece, and Cyprus. And this would drive Greece to leave the EU, and Cyprus is already cozying up to Russia. All this arm twisting is doing is actually driving people out of the U.S. sphere of influence. It's a failed policy. All right, when we come on back, we're going to be talking about human-caused global warming. It's not quite over yet for this winter. It's actually gotten colder here on Oahu over the last few days. The big chill is still out there. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to spend a little time talking about health and science, and we're going to start off with human-caused global warming. It has been a little warmer this week, and the people in Boston were celebrating the fact that finally the huge amount of snow is starting to melt a little tiny bit, but the joy is rather short-lived because apparently there is another cold system and storm heading in to the Northeast for this weekend. This is the last weekend of winter on the calendar, The equinox is next week, and it looks like they're going to get snow, possibly enough to set the all-time record for snowiest winter since they began keeping records. And it doesn't really matter if there's a record set or not. A lot of them have been. You need to go back to 10 years ago when the promoters of human-caused global warming were insisting snowfalls are a thing of the past. Winter of 2009, the British Met Office declared because of human-caused global warming it would be a green winter, and Britain got hit with one of the hardest winters in recent memory. If they can't predict what's happening a couple of months ahead, what makes them think they can predict what the climate will be doing 100 years from now? Especially because none of these computer models take variations in solar output into account, because we don't know all of the cycles the sun goes through. We know the 11-year sunspot cycle, the 22-year magnetic cycle, but there are clearly indications of much longer cycles of solar output. And if you don't have those, if you can't account for them, then your climate models aren't going to work 100 years into the future. They got it completely wrong over 10 years. But they're still pushing this agenda. Let's see, story out of San Diego Free Press. February 2015 sets records for snow and cold. And it was all across the country. The carbon Nazis are saying, well, it was just New England, everybody else is roasty toasty. Nope. Records in Colorado, records in the Alps, all across Europe, Japan. Story out of Patch.com. No, you weren't imagining it. February was third coldest on record in New Jersey since they started keeping records in 1895. Now, here's an interesting story over at Breitbart. The BBC's climate change coverage is not just dishonest, it is illegal. And they're talking about a show that the BBC just aired trying to reinforce the myth of human-caused global warming, and they brought in these three mathematicians to look at some numbers BBC provided and say, oh yes, without a question the world is getting warmer, blah, 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 and so forth and so on. And they were trying to make a big deal out of the fact that the world has warmed by around 0.8 of a degree since 1880. So what they didn't mention, of course, is the Earth goes through these periods of the ice ages followed by the interglacials. And when we're coming out of the ice ages, the world does get warmer. It's supposed to. That's the way it works. And we just emerged from the little ice age only 200 years ago. And they were out there talking about, you know, how accurate the IPCC's computer models are, but they aren't. They completely missed what's been going on for the last 10 years. And the world is waking up to this fraud. Apparently, they had a referendum on the carbon tax in Switzerland. It lost in a landslide. 92% of Swiss voters rejected the carbon tax. All of Al Gore's propaganda notwithstanding here. Now, here's another interesting little story from the Daily Sheeple. Mainstream media discovers what created ISIS. It's global warming, and this is not a joke. Articles saying that all of this Mideast upset in ISIS were caused by global warming appeared in Slate, Wired, The Telegraph, NBC, and The Guardian. We have a list at my website of all the insane things that have been blamed on human-caused global warming. I need to repost that. We had that other article the other day saying that the war in Syria was the fault of global warming, and 3 years of covert U.S. attempts at regime change had nothing to do with it. It's all the fault of global warming. Of course, the John Birch Society has a different view. They think ISIS is all the fault of Russia. And hang on, I have to respond something to my lady love. She's having a computer issue I got to fix on the next commercial break here. All righty, now here's another little story to make you stay up at night. And it has to do with the DuPont Chemical Corporation, which apparently has been dumping a dangerous chemical called C8 into 2 local aquifers in West Virginia. And the West Virginians are suing on the basis that DuPont knew this chemical was causing birth defects and chose to do nothing. Now, to their credit, 3M, which was using Teflon, which requires the C8 chemical, told DuPont they didn't want to use their product anymore because of the dangers it posed to public health. Apparently, there's a major lawsuit going on in California over the fact that regulatory agencies allowed fracking companies to pump their toxic chemicals into protected aquifers. That's a big reason there's a drought in California right now. The water is there, it's just now unusable. So, anyway, as I mentioned earlier in the show, they've now identified the specific strain of measles that is causing this current epidemic, and it turns out it is the exact same strain used to make the vaccine, which reinforces the idea that this vaccine not only is not protecting people from measles, it's actually causing it. And then, of course, the corporate media says, oh, it's all the fault of the unvaccinated. Look how many people have measles. You have got to go on out and get your measles vaccine. It's all about the money. It's all about pushing product. Okay, we're going to take a phone call here. Jason in Ohio. Jason, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, it's a wonder to talk to you, aloha. And I just want to say that you're right about the global warming. I mean, we had at the time in, what was it, 1700s or 1800s, that the Times was frozen over for a year, and they had stores and everything built on there, and people ice skated.
Oh, yeah, the Winter Fair. Yeah, there are paintings about it and everything. And, yeah, if you go and you look at the artwork from the Little Ice Age, you can see very clearly how much cold and snow and ice there was. And it looks like we're heading into another one, because the Maunder minimum refers to a noted drop in sunspot activity that coincided with the Little Ice Age, and we've got the same thing happening right now. Okay, and Jason, I'm sorry, we got to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line when we get back, and we'll be right back as soon as I fix my wife's computer. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today here, and interesting story breaking. I guess that whole vast right-wing conspiracy thing is spreading across the globe, because apparently Netanyahu is now out there trying to play victim again by saying there is a worldwide effort to ensure he loses the Israeli elections. They're all against me. They all hate me. They want the Nazis to come back. And I think it's a sign that Bibi is losing it. Not that he ever really impressed me as the picture of mental stability in the first place, but when he's out there saying, oh, they're out to get me, and let's face it, Israel, culturally, has a lot of paranoia. It is ingrained, it's propagandized into them. The world hates you. The world is out to get you. Everybody's a closet Nazi. That's how Israel's government maintains control over the people. Keep the fear going. And Netanyahu is clearly believing his own propaganda, where he's hoping that at least the Israeli people will. The rest of the world wants me gone. You must vote me back in. I think it's going to get very interesting in Israel and Syria and Gaza between now and the actual election. Getting on back to the medical stuff here. The FDA has approved double the amount of aluminum in the new version of the Gardasil vaccine. And apparently were so much in a hurry to approve this, they skipped a critical safety step. Normally, new vaccines have to go through the Vaccines and Related Biological to the Products Advisory Committee, rather. And they just skipped that to approve the Gardasil 9 vaccine. And Gardasil has caused a lot of harm to a lot of people. And there was an interesting video we put up at whatreallyhappened.com the other day where this doctor came out and said that the linkage between cervical cancer and this particular virus is tenuous at best, because when they were analyzing the tissue samples of the cancer, normally if the HPV were the cause of it, there should have been plenty there. But they had to use this polymerase chain reaction to amplify it enough to get some to identify. And he says that means it was present, but it doesn't really say it was the cause. And even the developer of the polymerase chain reaction process says it is not intended as a diagnostic tool. It is simply there to amplify samples of DNA for analysis. And because of that process of amplification, you don't know how much is originally in that sample. If it's a lot or a little. And if it's a little, then it's probably not the causative agent. But they're out there to sell the new product. And there are so many young girls who have been harmed by this. But it's all driven by money. Marketing, 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 marketing. This need to get pieces of paper and ink to pay to the bankers who funded the country, funded the government, funded your business, your mortgage, your car. It's reached the point where this need to grab more of that paper and ink stuff is destroying what used to be best in the American character. We used to be a nation that took pride in quality, safe products. Not anymore. Quality, safe products, those are too expensive. Medicines that cure the sick, that's too much trouble. The new business model is we're going to make medicines that we sell to perfectly healthy people. And it really is on the moral level of the traveling Wild West medicine show salesman. Now, here's another very interesting story, and it involves an environmental activist, Eric McDavid, who has been in prison for 9 years. And he was recently exonerated and released because his supporters, using the Freedom of Information Act, obtained court documents proving that the government withheld evidence that showed he was entrapped and set up by the FBI. Now, when we think of FBI entrapment, we think terror suspect. This guy was an environmental activist. And it's probably going to surprise a lot of you that the FBI would even be concerned with environmental activism, but in fact, if you go back and you look at the COINTELPRO scandal of the 1960s, which blew up in the 1970s, resulted in congressional hearings, COINTELPRO was not just targeting the anti-war movement and the civil rights movement. They were targeting the Native American movement, the early feminists, and yes, environmental groups as well, because they just get in the way of those corporations that we have to protect. And that is the state of the country as it is today. And it goes back to what I said. We're at a time right now where Americans really do need to wake up and face the reality of what this government is, and actually has been for quite some time. They succeeded in hiding their true nature from you, much as the way the royalty of medieval Europe succeeded in hiding their reality away from the common people, putting out this image of divine right, and I act on behalf of the gods. But we need to face up to what this government is doing, because this country is still our country. Whatever the bankers may say, notwithstanding. This is our country. Top of that Constitution, we the people. We are the owners of this nation. And ultimately, we are responsible for the behavior of that government. And we need to start meeting that responsibility. And we need to basically reach that awareness that this government rules us with lies, fraud, and deception, and has been doing so all along. This government lies about everything. I think they're afraid to tell the truth even once, out of a fear that we might learn to tell the difference. And I think that if we owe anything to the next generation of Americans, we owe them freedom from a government that rules with lies, fraud, and deception. That's our highest moral duty right now. That Constitution is the nation and its Bill of Rights. Any government that is not in compliance with that contract with America is not a legal, legitimate government of this land. And we need to start viewing it as such. If they don't want to comply with the Constitution, they should seek other employment. Got a lot of potholes to fill out there on the roads, a lot of rails that need to be nailed down a little more firmly into the ties. There are plenty of things that they can do. But they can't be in the government if they're not willing to comply with the contract. Now, I'm hearing all these people saying, well, it's time to get rid of the Constitution, or as that caller said, they got rid of it long ago. The federal government doesn't exist without that Constitution. The authority of the federal government rests on that Constitution and the Bill of Rights. If there's no Constitution, the government is illegitimate. Just a bunch of power-mad, sociopathic money junkies swindling you out of everything that you've got, as long as you go on believing that they somehow have a right to do it. There's a moment in everybody's life when you're growing up where you cross a threshold, where you stop seeing your parents from the point of view of a child, and you realize they're just other human beings with faults and frailties. And it's time for the American people to step across that threshold and stop looking up to the government as some kind of in loco parentis authority figure, and realize they're just other humans, criminal humans, sociopathic humans, greedy humans, unethical, immoral humans. And just like you reach that point where you tell your parents, look, you're not running my life anymore, we need to do the same with this government. As long as it refuses to abide by the rules we, the people, set up. There's the music. I got to get out here and get some animation work done, pay some bills. We will be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, stay angry. Share what you know with who you know. Spread the word of Genesis Communication and whatreallyhappened.com. We need your support. Thank you for everything that you've done, and we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.